What's up, players and planeswalkers? I'm Hitmonchampion, also known as Aaron, and welcome to Partners with MTG. I've taken over this channel while Tyler and Andrew weren't looking, and for my first video as the new channel owner, we'll be doing a deck tech over one of my favorite commanders ever. Say hello to Kokusho, the Evening Star. On the surface, Kokusho looks like a very lackluster and underwhelming commander, who seems far better suited for the 99 of other decks. I mean, after all, he won't get his trigger if he goes to the command zone. However, I'm here to tell you that a dedicated Kokusho deck can wreak havoc on your playgroup. There really is no better feeling than giving the table a haunting more extreme than the Amityville house, with a giant ghost dragon on top of that. The main focus of this deck is going to be constantly killing Kokusho and bringing him back through various reanimation effects. First things first, the bread and butter of this deck. The most important cards are the reanimation effects. We want to jam a lot of these into the deck because our commander will always be going to the graveyard, since his death trigger won't happen if he's sent to the command zone, and we want to be able to ensure that our little Kooshball can come back all the time. Yes, I call him Kooshball. Don't judge me. Of course, the big mamma jamma of reanimation spells is the one and only Reanimate. For a cool 1 black mana, we can bring back any creature from any graveyard. The life loss is particularly meaningless in this deck because our commander gains us stupid amounts of life. The other big reanimation spells are the 3 enchantments in Animate Dead, Dance of the Dead, and Necromancy. They each have their own differences and distinctions, but for this deck, they will mostly act the same, and might as well just be treated as another copy of Reanimate. Goryo's Vengeance can bring back any legendary creature in our graveyard. Notably, it only exiles the creature at the end of the turn, so if we sacrifice the creature beforehand, we don't have to worry about that pesky exile clause. Footsteps of the Goryo is a very simple card, letting us revive one of our creatures before sacrificing at the end of the turn. That's right, sacrifice it, not exile. So even if we don't have a sack outlet on board, we can use this to revive Kokusho without any fear having to put him back in the command zone. Grim Return is a bit more restrictive, only being able to revive a creature that just died, but also has the benefit of being able to bring back an opponent's creature as well. Dread Return is a bit more costly at 4 mana, but being able to flash it back for only sacrificing 3 creatures is great, essentially giving us an emergency reanimate if we're in top deck mode or flooding out. Machias the Unhallowed, one of the boogeymen of Commander, and it's no different here. For every reanimation effect and spell in this deck, he can basically give us another copy of it. He also pairs disgustingly well with Cauldron of Souls, which is also in this deck. Chainer Dementia Master is a repeatable reanimation effect on a body, which is really good. While 3 life is nothing for this deck, 3 black mana can add up quick. But it never hurts to have a mana sink if you just want to win the game. Phyrexian Delver is a reanimate on a body, which is nice to have as it can sometimes give us a 2-for-1 if we reanimate it and then use it to reanimate something else. Corpse Dance is an interesting card as it's essentially a repeatable Goryo's Vengeance. While it is a bit more costly at 5 mana with the buyback, like Chainer, if we have nothing else to do with our mana, it will be a great mana sink. Victimize can bring back 2 things for only 3 mana and another creature to sacrifice, and while not as good, Blood for Bones does a good impression of Victimize. One thing it does have over Victimize, however, is you have to sacrifice a creature before the effect resolves, meaning one of those creatures that you can bring back is the very one that you sacrificed. Those were some of our best reanimation effects, but not everyone is going to have access to those, myself included. so you may need to substitute them. Exhume is cheap at only 2 mana, but allowing our opponents to also bring back a creature can be costly. It won't always be a big problem, but it's always something to take into account. Apprentice Necromancer and Doomed Necromancer are almost identical to each other. They both bring back a creature for a black, tapping and sacrificing themselves. Doomed Necromancer will let you keep the creature you bring back, while Apprentice Necromancer gives the creature haste at the cost of sacrificing it at the end of the turn. It doesn't exile it at least, but just try to make sure it's a creature you don't want to stick around. Hell's Caretaker is basically a more restrictive version of the Necromancers. While his activation can sacrifice any creature and doesn't require mana, only being able to do it on upkeep is a major restriction. Kaya's Ghost Form, Unhallowed Pact, and Unholy Integer are all enchantments that bring back your creature to the field when they die. Pact and Integer will actually bring opponents' creatures back to your side of the field should you enchant them, but you'll rarely want to do this over bringing back Kokusho. Abnormal Endurance, Supernatural Stamina, and Undying Evil are basically instant versions of the enchantments just mentioned. Zombify, Rise from the Grave, and Ever After are more costly reanimation spells. Ever After at least had the benefit of bringing back 2 creatures at once. Quite possibly the most interesting card in this deck is Dawn of the Dead. It lets you bring back any creature on your upkeep. You will have to exile it at the end of the turn, but as mentioned earlier, you will likely be able to get around this. Sheoldred is similar, except she also makes your opponent sacrifice creatures on their upkeeps. Personally, I prefer Dawn of the Dead over Sheoldred for reanimating things. Dawn of the Dead is cheaper and is an enchantment, so it's safer. Sheoldred, while she does have the advantage of being able to reanimate, is going to be a heavy target for removal because of the effect she has on the game. So that was the reanimation. Now on to the second most important part of the deck, the sacrifice outlets. You want as many free ones as possible, as I'm sure you've heard before. Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar need no real introduction. They can help us pay for our reanimation effects with the mana they generate, and are easily the best sack outlets in this deck. Viscera's Seer is also a classic, allowing us to scry for sacrificing a creature, and for only 1 black mana in total. Yahenni is a sack outlet that can turn into a potentially huge threat, able to dodge most board wipes and removal. Slightly less good is Carrion Feeder. Yes, it's cheap, and it's free, but doesn't do much for us otherwise. Yes, it can get big, but it doesn't have evasion of any kind, and it can't even block. Still, if you don't have Yahenni, definitely consider it. Razaketh is a fascinating one indeed. Not only is he a prime reanimation target, he basically has the potential to win you the game. Think about it. Use him to sacrifice Kokusho and tutor for a reanimation spell. Use it to bring back Kokusho. Second to Razaketh again, tutor for another reanimation spell. Rinse and repeat. I know that may sound a bit Magical Christmas Land, and it is, but still worth mentioning. Now there is one sack outlet you might be thinking of that I haven't mentioned yet, and that's Altar of Dementia. Well, I'm here to tell you, Altar of Dementia isn't the best for this deck. We don't exactly want to mill in this deck, lest we risk milling our precious reanimation spells. And also, milling your opponents with a deck that's not focused on mill could be dangerous, as you might unknowingly be giving them an advantage. So, I would advise you to take caution on including Altar of Dementia. It's definitely the first free one I would actually consider not running. Much like our reanimation spells, there are some less exciting sack outlets that might still be good, but don't have the power of free sack outlets. Disciple of Gristlebrand is very interesting. It only costs 1 colorless for the sacrifice effect, and the effect is very good. Gaining life equal to the creature's toughness, which fits with our life gain theme. Soldevi Adnate has to tap to sacrifice a creature, but if that creature's Kokusho, we'll be getting 6 black mana, which is an ample amount to use on other spells. Disciple of Bolus can gain life and draw cards, and be reanimated if we wish to use its effect again. Ghoulcaller Gisa helps us build up an army of zombies, and Attrition can act as repeatable removal. Better though are the lands that allow us to sacrifice creatures, those being Phyrexian Tower, High Market, and Myron the Moaning Well. Aside from Phyrexian Tower, bear in mind that High Market and Myron both cost mana to use. The market has to tap, meaning you won't be able to use the mana you could have gotten from it. And Myron basically costs 4 mana because its ability requires 3 and tapping it. Even still, a land with a sacrifice outlet is very nice to have in this deck. We won't always want, need, or be able to reanimate our commander, so we'll want stand-in creatures that will be great to bring back over and over again. I won't go into too much detail because most of these speak for themselves. Runescarred Demon because Demonic Tutor on a body is good. Sidisi Undead Vizier because Diabolic Intent on a body is good. Grave Titan because making an undead army is good. Meteor Golem because destroying anything is good. Massacre Worm because killing things is good. Billis because trading life for card draw in a deck that gains a lot of life is good. Shriekmaw because targeted removal is good. And Archfiend of Despair because doubling up the damage our opponents take is good. Got it? Good. Finally, we come to our interesting tech cards that this deck will like. This next card in particular might be the best in the deck. If I were Mitch from the Commander's Quarters, I would call this our Golden Pig. But I'm not popular like Mitch, so yeah. Nim Deathmantle is an absolute powerhouse in this deck, which should be obvious for anyone who's played Commander for, 2 seconds. Especially in tandem with Phyrexian or Ashnod's Altar. Blade of Selves lets us swing with Kokusho, get 2 extra copies of it, and let the Legend Rule deal 10 damage to our opponents and gain us 30. Although it's useless in 1v1, so be careful with this one. To the surprise of no one, Helm of the Host is bonkers, giving us non-legendary copies of Kokusho to either sacrifice immediately or build an army of ghost dragons. Either's good. Much like the Archfiend of Despair, though not as good, admittedly, is Wound Reflection, making our opponents take heavier hits from Kokusho's death triggers. I say not as good because it can't be reanimated, and also the Archfiend makes so our opponents can't gain life. And with this deck being able to gain a lot of life and deal a lot of damage at the same time, Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood slot nicely into this deck. Now personally, I hate this combo, but I feel I should at least mention it. If not Sanguine Bond, Defiant Bloodlord is the same, just on a body, which could be better since it can be reanimated. And because this deck can gain about 15 life at a time, Aetherflux Reservoir is a no-brainer. I mentioned it earlier, but Diabolic Intent is great for this deck. A Demonic Tutor that lets us get a Kokusho trigger is pretty good from what I've heard. Finally, we won't always be able to rely on bringing back our commander straight back to the field. So for those emergency situations, it's nice to have either Phyrexian Reclamation or Volrath's Stronghold. While in the process of recording this, I think Tyler and Andrew have caught on, so I better wrap this up quick. While this deck may look janky on the surface, if you were to get underneath and play it, you'll find, you're right, it is pretty janky. But it's a fun and strong kind of jank. Your opponents won't know what hit them as Kooshball haunts their dreams. That about wraps it up for this deck tech. Now, I better get out of here before they catch me here. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.